Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. I am your host, Teri Wellbrock, and again, doing my happy heart dance. So excited to have another beautiful guest here with me. And there's a special reason that we're here together, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But today I welcome Elizabeth Kipp, and she is addiction recovery coach and ancestral clearing practitioner, yoga and meditation teacher specializing in chronic pain, stress management, and trauma-informed yoga. So welcome, Elizabeth.
Well, thank you so much, Teri. It's just great to be here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm going to tell everybody now so we aren't leaving them guessing. So you and I came together. You wrote a book. Gosh, The Way Through Chronic Pain. How many times did I say it as I was recording, right? And we connected through ACX, and I narrated the recent audiobook release of that beautiful book that I told you, gosh, I learned so much from it through narrating it. So do you want to talk to us about the inspiration behind that book?
Oh, actually, I had been already working on a book. I started that book when I got out of Dr. Peter Prescott's pain management program. That would be late 2013. Peter wrote a book too, by the way. He wrote this book, Conquer Chronic Pain, an Innovative Mind-Body Approach. And this is the doctory, researchery, and he has exercises in the back of the book, and it's very accessible, but it's a little bit more evidence-based, or not, that's not the wrong word, because my stuff's evidence-based too. It's a little bit more clinical, So my book is more like the patient manual, like that. And also my book, I felt, so I was in chronic pain for 40 years, and I was on medication for 31 of those. And I was in and out of hospitals and in and out of rehab centers, not addiction rehab centers, but like physical rehab, that kind of thing. Centers after surgery and between surgeries and stuff like that, because my back, I had this problem with my back. So I had broken my back, and the bones had kind of slipped, and so we were trying to stabilize the slip in the low back. And in my journey, I met a lot of I've sat in front of thousands and thousands of chronic pain patients. And mostly they didn't know how to talk to their doctors. I had a science background, so I knew how to talk to doctors. And I would walk in fairly empowered. I still had the burden, really, the psychological and kind of emotional, mental burden of the chronic pain brings, along with the physical. So that was a challenge. Like, they could make pronouncements, and I would take that in. And sometimes their pronouncements weren't accurate. Anyway, I sat in front of a lot of the chronic pain patients, and they didn't know how to talk to their doctors, number one, which is an issue. I mean, doctors are very educated, and we're not in their field, right? So we kind of go in there and kind of bow to them, and we might ignore our own body, kind of thing. And so that can be a problem. And I speak to that, not so much in the book, but I speak to it a lot on podcasts and stuff. I do speak to it a little bit in the book. But the thing is that the voice of the chronic pain patient is not an honest voice. A chronic pain patient is either quiet, doesn't complain at all, or complains all the time. And neither one of those is the truth. And so I felt that it was very important to bring a piece of work that actually brought forth what's happening inside the head of a chronic pain, the mental space of a chronic pain sufferer.
Yes, and so needed.
Yeah, so that hadn't been done. And the other thing was that I had a long journey, and I looked in lots of different places. And I finally, when I finally found Dr. Peter Prescott, I was able to kind of, he brought in tools and I was able to kind of bring the other tools, and we kind of had a full package. And, I just did this, the healing was kind of, that combination that he helped really propel me onto onto a path of unstoppable healing. The momentum was quite remarkable. So I felt like it was really important to talk about that story. And the reason was not just because the pain, the voice of a chronic pain patient isn't known, hasn't really been talked about too much. But the other thing is, everybody but Dr. Peter told, every doctor that I went to, except Peter Prescott, said, you will be in level 10 out of 7 out of 10 pain for the rest of your life, 24/7. Get used to it. And that's inaccurate. So I went into his program with 40 years of chronic pain, and I walked out 52 days later with no pain. And it wasn't just me. He had a 94% success rate. Now, not everybody that went into his program had 40 years of chronic pain, but a lot of them had 10. So chronic pain is not a life sentence. It's a misunderstanding in the medical model. When I heard that, when the doctors kept saying that, because of my science background, the way I heard it was, you're telling me more about the limitation of your medical model, the model that you're working in, than you're telling me about the body's ability to heal. So those were the kinds of things that I felt were really important to talk about. And that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah. Well, again, I told you I learned so much from it because, well, one, as a trauma survivor who didn't have a voice, I was the one who would just continue to just be living in whatever I was going through and being very quiet about it. And then when I moved here and it started to have the physical, I'd never had that physical struggles before. Well, then all of a sudden I found I had a voice. And it's so interesting what you just said about the doctor, because I went to a doctor here on the island. I hadn't yet established a primary care physician here on Hilton Head. So I went to this doctor, and one of the first things she said to me was, because obviously I had tears in my eyes because I was so sick. I was so sick. And she said, well, the first thing we're going to do is stick you on an anti-anxiety medication. And I just looked at her like, what? You don't, you just want to throw this pill at me to make my tears dry up? Like, what is going on here? And so, yeah, that's when I found my voice and said, hold up a second. That's not the solution I'm looking for. I don't want to mask. Like, I want to find out the root cause of what's going on here, because at the time I didn't know what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting thing that you bring in. I always say at this point, anytime a doctor wants to put me on a medication, I kind of go in the direction you did. Well, how does this get to the root of the problem, right? And if it doesn't, why is this a stopgap measure? Kind of, how will this serve me? And the other thing I go into is, now, before you put me on it, what's the exit plan?
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful advice. Yes.
Well, especially with a benzo or an opiate, or, an antidepressant medicine. The problem was, when my prescribing doctor's answer to getting me off the opiates and the benzos was to put me in a coma. And I asked him, how many times have you done that? And he said, none. And I'm like, dude, I'm not going to be your guinea pig. So fortunately, Dr. Prescott had taken thousands of people through this process of getting off the medication combination I was on. And he, so I'm just saying, like, you have to ask your doctor, what's the exit plan, to make sure that they know how to execute an exit plan. You see?
Yeah.
That's where that question came from. Right.
Oh, so empowering. I mean, truly empowering. Yes, exactly. Well, and one of the things you just said, and it popped up a question and then popped right back out of my head. So I'll have to try to, it'll come back to me in just a second. So, hold on, I'm going to sit here for a second because it was really, whatever you said was just very intriguing to me. It's not coming to me. All right, it'll come back.
Okay.
So let's talk about, so that was it. Okay, now it's back. So some of the things that you implemented, I know again, as I narrated the book and learned from you, were things that to me almost seemed like brain plasticity or rewiring, and so through meditation and yoga and all of these practices, is that really what's happening? Is you're reprogramming your mindset or shifting your mindset on and helping your body heal in that way?
Well, yes, and there's a few things that are happening there. So let's define chronic pain for the audience. Chronic pain is any pain that's felt 15 days out of 30 for 3 months or more. Any pain, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, financial. The brain can't tell the difference between one kind of pain and another. It all sends the same signal to the brain. It hurts. So the brain can't tell the difference between a broken bone and a broken heart, for instance. It's all the same signal. So that's what chronic pain is. What does it do? So we have a stress response. And when we're under threat, and normally the stress response is off as long as we're in safe space like we are here. But the minute we feel threatened, the stress response activated, and a whole bunch of biochemical, physiological things happen in the body to help us address the threat. The threat's addressed, stress response goes off, right? And in acute pain versus chronic pain, the stress response is acting normally. It's in balance. In chronic pain, the stress response gets stuck in the on position. So it's constantly, we become hypervigilant. We get this habit. Instead of being in balance, we're out of balance and we're hypervigilant. It creates changes in the brain. It creates brain fog, confusion, and it hits the emotional center so that we get, we normally, with a balanced, normal, healthy human, we have a negative bias in the brain. And how does that look? You come to me with an idea I've never heard of before, my first reaction is going to be no. That is normal for us. Then that's the back brain, the primitive part of the brain. I'm keeping myself safe. Then we bring the frontal lobe in, and which is this executive functioning part, and then we do the reasoning, and then we go, well, maybe that's a good idea, right? But we have to feel safe enough to even be able to get to the executive functioning. So that new idea, if it's threatening in any way, good luck with getting a yes to that, if it's perceived as being threatening. So in chronic pain, chronic stress is the same. The stress response gets stuck into the on position, and the emotional center in the brain gets into this negative, very pronounced, much more negative mind. So the pain is bad, the world is bad, whatever we think caused the pain is bad, and I'm bad. Like there's this very pervasive, negative mental conundrum that we get into. And I talk about that as the cycle of suffering in the book. So what was the question? Sorry.
we were talking about brain plasticity, and
So that becomes a habit. So the nervous system then, so let's go back. Let's start from the beginning. The brain is highly responsive to current circumstances, and it's built on past circumstances. So its reactions in the present moment are based on what worked in the past, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So how I'm reacting in this moment, how I'm reacting, versus in this moment, for me, I have a very, at this point, I have a very sensitive startle response, which has a lot to do with my history. Now, I'll do that really quickly, but you know what? Now, because of all the work I've done, I come down in about 3 seconds. I, I'm like, I'm safe because I know how to do it. Maybe not 3 seconds, but maybe like 5 or 10 seconds. I'm with a breath or two. I'm down as long as as long as I've assessed that whatever startled me in the first place isn't threatening me. Okay.
Right.
So most of the time when I get startled, it's not a threat. It's just my nervous system very highly tuned. I haven't really been able to get that patterning out, and I'm not sure that I want to. It's the calming down that's the part that I've been working on. So that's kind of a normal brain is very attuned to present moment, and it's affected by the degree to which it reacts and the way it reacts depends on past conditioning. Now, in chronic pain, because of the things that I talked about, this negative bias and the hypervigilance, and that we keep doing that. And the nervous system and the brain are like, oh, this is how we're doing life now. This is how we're doing life. And so we get this habit because that's where I grew up having to kind of metaphorically walk on eggshells. So you can see why I have such a tight, a very sensitive startle response that's kind of epically, sensitive. But I've done all this work in recovery to rewire so that, yes, I had this high. It's not as high as it used to be, but it's still pretty healthy, right? And I just come down much quicker. That's a sign of recovery, right? But it took the work of yoga and meditation to calm the brain and allow the brain to heal the changes that happen in the brain because of chronic pain. That's why these modalities are helpful. Chronic pain changes the way the brain operates. So to heal chronic pain, we need to bring modalities that heal those changes. Opiates and benzos don't do that.
Yes. Amen. And
Yeah.
fascinating that as you spoke, and I didn't want to interrupt you, but I so wanted to say, oh my gosh, did you just see what happened with me? So as we're talking about this stuff, for whatever reason, like my shoulders started to pull up, pull up, pull up, particularly my left shoulder, which was to me back in EMDR therapy, like that would be a thing that, so, and as you did, and you were talking about, and I've learned through healing work, usually in 3 to 5 seconds. Yeah. And so what I did, I noticed it, and because subconsciously, as I was listening to you, and I was like, took a breath and it released, and I just felt it. And then you started to say the words, and I was like, oh, I'm living it as she speaks it. And it's so true how,
Yeah.
as we do this healing work, like it's almost like our bodies know, oh, hey, look, okay, it's time. We need to take a little breath and just
Yeah.
kind of relax.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
the only way you got to that level where you're actually bringing the tool in when you need it was because you've practiced. This is the value of a daily practice. So it took the trauma and the habit we developed because of it, the unresolved trauma. Like we can be traumatized and then we can resolve it and it's not a thing anymore. But most of us have unresolved trauma and it's all this suppressed energy, trapped energy. We need to address that. Yeah, so the work we do, it took time for us to build that habit. It's going to take time to rewire it, which is why we need that daily practice. You brush your teeth every day, not once a year. Yeah, it's like that.
Right.
We
Yeah.
have to practice all that. And because you've done so much practice, I know this because I learned it myself. Um, you know, I sit on the mat every morning and remind my nervous system, this is how we do life through my yoga practice. And it's very specific depending on the diet. I have so much training in yoga teacher, so much yoga teacher training, I can kind of put a practice together. This is what I need today, kind of thing. And so when because of that practice, when I get off the mat and I get unsettled in life, I know to breathe because I've practiced, but I've done lots and lots. I've had every day I've done practice, right? So it's clear that you've done the practice, or you wouldn't be able to do that.
Right, right. And I've talked about it so many times. I literally, when I first started on this healing path, had my calendar and I would look at it every day of things that I needed to do, meetings I had or whatever it was. And I literally started putting things like take a nature walk, meditate, yoga, whatever it was, practice mindfulness. That I put it on my to-do list because for that exact reason, I had to make it a habit. I had to make it a daily practice so that, yes, it would just become a habitual pattern. Like what just happened, I didn't really consciously think about it, but I could feel my body go, take that breath in and just let those shoulders fall back down. Yeah.
And so I love that you do that. You got it on your to-do list. And you just gave us a perfect example of what it's like to rewire an old habit into a new one. That's exactly what it is. So there's like the mindset thing, and then there's the pattern in the nervous system. And that's a network in the brain. That's, it's a lot of because the brain is so responsive and adaptive. So we can get an old habit that's built in the brain. It's an actual network of neurons in the brain. But then we can build a new highway. We can build a new network. And so in my recovery, and when I tell myself and when I tell my clients, is in this moment, the thing that I'm doing, is it helping to build the new neural net, the new way to live, or is it putting the old highway under reconstruction again? Right. So every moment makes a difference. That's how responsive the brain is. Whatever we're doing, it leaves an impression in the brain, and the brain reacts to it, which it speaks to neuroplasticity, which means we can do this rewiring and shifting, which is beautiful. And we have to take responsibility for our actions because they have repercussions, profound repercussions.
Yes, I just smiled so big when you said that because literally, again, we're having like this empathic connection. As right before you started talking, in my mind, I was seeing, you have that old rutted road, like the wagon wheel had just made this big divot in the road, and you get stuck in that. And it's like, how do I get out of it? And so you can either fill it in, or you can say, oh, well, let's just go this other route and make a new road. It's then you said it. It was like you can do construction over that old pathway or try, or you can say, hey, let's build a new scenic route.
Yes. And what's kind of interesting about, I'm just going to put a little nuance into what you just said. Yes. And so there's this understanding. I don't remember who invented it. I've forgotten his name at the moment, or who discovered it, but it's neurons that wire together, fire together. And the more you use that pathway, that particular pathway, the more wiring and the faster it wires. Sorry, the faster it fires. So so when we do the work to do the rewiring, say, I'll give you an example. Say I'm sitting in meditation and I'm like, I'm good, when I'm keeping my focus on the breath and the mind's jumping, it's like turbulence in the mind, and I just keep bringing the mind back, and I keep bringing the mind back. And that's the practice in meditation. Just keep bringing the mind back to the focus, whether it's a mantra or the breath or whatever. here's the thing. When you start rewiring, when the actual brain rewiring thing starts in a meditation, when I want to get up and get out of that meditation, when I know, and I'm sitting for 11 minutes and I get to 5.5 minutes, and like my mind and my body are like, I'm so done. Let's get out of here. That when you meet that resistance, that's when the brain is rewired. You sit still. When it gets hard, you stay there. Because that's when the brain is rewiring and you're teaching it, oh no, we're doing life this way. We're not doing this other thing. We're not getting up and getting out of here like you want to. That's the old pattern. No, we're going to sit here and we're going to meet that resistance and we're going to breathe. And we're going to love the resistance, and we're going to embrace and have self-compassion with how hard this is. Right? And we're just going to stay there.
Oh my
And
gosh, I love that. You
yeah.
saw me getting all happy about it. And I love it because again, you're just so speaking to me. I had this as we kept peeling onion layers away, right? And doing the healing through EMDR particularly, which for those listening is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. That was my particular journey. But then I started doing some somatic work and so forth. So all of a sudden I found being out on the beach, one of my favorite places in the world, I was experiencing horrific, not panic attacks, but just very heightened anxiety about feeling very exposed in a wide open space, blah, blah, blah. So, but doing exactly what you said, like wanting desperately to be a hermit crab and just put my umbrella over my head and crawl, belly crawl through the sand and get back to the parking lot to my safe space. But then really forcing myself, because at times it felt like forcing, to sit with it and be with it and allow it and welcome it. And, truly that's what has been shifting things. It's still a work in progress, but I love that you said that.
And let's just make sure that we back up just one step that I feel like you skipped over. You're walking on the beach and your nervous system gets activated and you feel like you want to be a hermit crab. The first thing you did was you looked around to assess that you're safe for real. And you assessed that. And then you said, oh, I'm still having this reaction. And then you did the work. It's because that alertness is the nerve, we have to honor that. Sometimes it's there because, there's a threat and we need to address it. That was an old program that was running, remember the neural net? Neurons that wire together, fire together. Well, open spaces like that on the beach, that's firing off a network where you had a thing that happened to you in the past around that, and it's firing the whole network. And now you're rewiring it. But you definitely checked to make sure that you were safe before you did that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Just checking because I want to make sure that the listeners kind of got that part. Yeah.
It's so true. But fascinatingly, I now recognize it when I do it. And sometimes I don't want to say force. It sounds so harsh. I encourage myself to look around, to remind myself there is not a threat. That's something that's arising. Look around. It's so beautiful here. I mean, and then I start to, okay, let's come back to the now. Let's be here in the now, in the present moment. So yes, thank you for that clarification. Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, I think your explanation was perfect. I just it's easy for us to kind of skip over, and I'm thinking like, oh, well, let's just make sure that the listening audience sees all the steps there, because you and I are so used to doing the work that
Right.
that's just a half a split second really for us to do the assessment. That's how highly wired we are.
Right. Right.
And it's actually unconscious.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of unconscious, but just because I teach this stuff.
Yes. Well, so now can folks connect with you to do meditation practices or yoga? I mean, do you teach that to individual, and do you do group or do you do individual coaching?
I do it all. I just
Okay.
released an 18 video that each one's 30 minutes package called Foundations of Trauma Recovery, which is all online videos that you can practice. You get the principles and practices of trauma recovery, the foundational principles, and then you can always email me uh, uh, about any particular questions. But that's like a standalone program. So I do that. I do group coaching. Now I'm doing work specifically every other week on post betrayal, the Post Transformation Betrayal Institute. That's of Debbie Silber's. Dr. Debbie Silber has a platform that's specific to healing from the betrayal experience. And I'm the I'm a trauma informed coach on that. I'm a betrayal coach, but I teach the trauma informed yoga and a chronic pain recovery and ancestral clearing, a little bit of addiction recovery work that people want. You can get very codependent in that betrayal space. And we have another gentleman who does work with codependency, but I'm perfectly capable of doing that myself. It's just I tend to do the trauma informed yogas when I coach generally, and then I have individual sessions all the time. I do really I work with people in recovery from addiction and from recovery from chronic pain. And I do a lot of ancestral clearing for anybody. Well, you don't have to be in recovery from anything. I got all kinds of people that come to me for ancestral clearing. So yeah.
Yes. Awesome. Well, I've had Dr. Debbie on the show and just love her and her work. So yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I could sit here and talk to you for, I'm sure, hours on end, but I certainly wanted to give you an opportunity to leave any words of wisdom or final thoughts with folks or anything that we hadn't had a chance to touch upon that you wanted to talk about.
Well, thank you. Yeah, a couple things. One is ask for help if you need it. Don't be afraid. That's the problem that we have in chronic pain is we don't want it to get worse, and the mind is not our friend in the chronic pain experience. And so we tend to not want to change things because the mind might tell us it's going to get worse. But you have to change whatever you're doing. You got to change in order for it to change. You can't keep doing the same thing. So, ask for help. And Teri and I are here for you. And if we're not a good fit for you, we probably know somebody that is. So ask for help. The other thing is the greatest healer in your life lives within you. It's not in a doctor. It's not in a therapist. It's not in the most beautiful nurse you've ever, the most wonderful nurse you've ever had, because I've had a whole score of them. They're beautiful, beautiful guides to help us, to turn us to help us connect into our own healing power. But doctors can set a bone and stitch up a wound. They can't tell the body how to heal. So understand your orientation, right? Respect the knowledge of the healthcare community, but remember that the healing power lives within you, not in them. And that was something I had to learn the hard way. So I'm giving it to you on a platter so you don't have to go through that.
It's so very needed and so very true. It's again, you just so speak to my soul because one, so I've had this lump in my throat and it's been going on for 2 years, and they've put a camera down my throat twice at the ENT, and finally he was like, oh, let's do a CT scan, and I was like, oh, I don't want to do it, but let's just make sure it's not some cancerous tumor. And so when nothing, so they just keep coming back, there's nothing there, there's nothing there, there's nothing there. And so I was meditating on it yesterday and just saying, all right, so something has to be going on. Well, something came across my radar. I want to say on human design or something. And so I said, oh, let me just go in because I'm so curious. I love learning. I love learning. And so I plugged it in, plugged it in, plugged it in. And whenever my thing came up with, it was like, oh, like your energy center is like it all like it's through your throat and through. And so I was like, oh my, it just keeps coming back to this. So it's like my body is just keeps saying to me, like, I don't know if it has to do with my voice. I don't know what it is. I'll continue to do the work on it. But I love what you're saying because I now know, yes, my body is trying to tell me something. And it's a matter of being able to tune in and listen. And yeah, I've checked off the boxes. Okay, not a cancer tumor. Okay, not a, and done that part of it. And now it's like, all right, now I need to do the work. So I love that you said ask for help because, yeah, that's where I am.
That could have an ancestral component to it as well, that throat thing.
Yeah,
So it's just an aspect that we can we can include in the other work. I'd also see an acupuncturist.
yeah. Oh yeah, I did that years ago. But yeah, I will do that. Thank you. There's a
Yeah,
great
they have ways to bring the body back to balance, which is what the intelligence in the body's trying to do in the first place. Keep us in balance. So when something comes up when we've got some symptomology, that's giving us an indication that we're out of balance, you know. And our job is to do whatever we can to support the body as it brings itself back to balance. So what do? We balance our activity, we balance the stresses in our life, we balance our diet, and we balance our spiritual life. We look for balance wherever we can. We make sure our sleep is balanced, all those things. And I'm not saying any of those things will cure it, but it'll help support the body as its intelligence, and we can bring ancestral clearing as well, as it supports the body its intelligence can do the work it needs to do to bring itself back to balance.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is acupuncture is very good at is another thing that's very good at that. Yoga is really, there's lots of different modalities that are very good at bringing it back to balance, but acupuncture is always in my back hip pocket for stuff. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Well, wonderful. Well, so last thing, how do folks connect with you? Where did they find you?
Oh, you can find me at my website, which is my name with a dash, Elizabeth-Kipp.com. You got to put the hyphen in between Elizabeth and Kipp, Kipp. All my social media is up there. There's lots of free resources. You can book a session with me there. You can have a free introductory session if you want. It's all there.
Well, I'm telling everybody go connect with you on Facebook because your inspirational posts, I love seeing them every day. It's just so beautiful. Your words of wisdom. I mean, the photos that you share are just it always just kind of melts me a little bit and brings me back to just a very calm state. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And what a beautiful platform you have. So nice to spend some time with you today.
Oh, well, it's just been a joy for me as well. And again, I've learned so much from you. So I'm so glad we've connected. Yes, thank you for being here. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us today on the Healing Place podcast. And remember, until next time, be gentle with yourself. Thanks. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody. Teri Wellbrock here. Just wanted to thank you again for being a part of this healing space and my hashtag Hope for Healing journey. Thank you for sharing, liking, inviting others to join, listening in. You've really helped this show blossom. It has now been downloaded in 136 countries and is in the top 2% globally out of 3.2 million shows, which is just amazing. And it's all because of you and your tuning in and inviting others and sharing and liking and loving. And your reviews on Apple really help too. My goal is to hit 100 5-star reviews by the end of the year. And I am closing in on that. So if you are listening in on Apple or Apple Podcasts, please go and rate the show and leave a review if you absolutely love it. And I would be most appreciative. Also, if you would like to receive my monthly Hope for Healing newsletter, please be sure to go to teriwellbrock.com It's Teri, just one R, WELLBROCK.com. And I have a gift to send you for signing up for that monthly Hope for Healing newsletter. Plus, there are many other resources listed on that page, including a resource library. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.